We, as a group of Unitarian Universalists, tend to think we're pretty smart and pretty educated. In fact, only Hindus, according to the Pew Research Center, have a more educated population than Unitarian Universalists. Nearly 8 in 10, 79% of people identify as Hindu have a college degree. We came in second place with 67% of people identifying as Unitarian Universalists having a college education. We value education so much in Unitarian Universalism that we easily overlook on a regular basis that 1/3 of us in any given congregation are not college educated. Stupid, dummy, moron, dumbbell, dunce, retard, half-wit, simpleton, nitwit, airhead, lame brain. There are others. I am not proud to admit that I've used all of these at some point or another. Since 2015, I've probably used these words more than I have my entire life up to that point, especially in reference to those of a certain red baseball-hatted political persuasion, as well as sometimes humanity in general. Anger, fear, frustration cause us to label, name call, scapegoat, and demean, even when every fiber of us knows that it's wrong to do that. This is the third in a series of sermons I've been doing that look on some underground or hidden prejudices, the things that don't get the top billing. We've looked at fat phobia, we've looked at poverty, and today we're going to look at being uneducated and some of the attendant problems that go along with prejudices in that area, but also the problem of ignorance itself and how that's dangerous. Over the years, and I think Sierra Marie's Time for All Ages this morning reinforced for us, we've learned that not everyone is as stupid as we might have thought they once were. Once upon a time when we didn't know so much about how people learn and how our brains work. Learning disabilities and dyslexia, attention deficit disorder, a whole range of things explain to us now why some people seem to have such a hard time learning. And we understand that better now. We also know now that if you're poor, that if you're tired, that if you're hungry, that if you're suffering from trauma, that if you're cold, you don't learn well. And you don't develop your intellectual capacities as well. Doesn't mean you're not intelligent. We've learned that human beings can have a variety of intelligences in a variety of different areas. And yet we still tend to see people who share our particular way of learning and intelligence as smart, and others who don't as, well, not so smart. We, as a group of Unitarian Universalists, tend to think we're pretty smart and pretty educated. In fact, only Hindus, according to the Pew Research Center, have a more educated population than Unitarian Universalists. Nearly 8 in 10, 79% of people identify as Hindu have a college degree. We came in second place with 67% of people identifying as Unitarian Universalists having a college education. I saw something, this is a little while ago now, but I'm going to gamble not a lot has changed about the average or mean person who is a Unitarian Universalist. I don't think it's going too far out on a limb to say that if you took all Unitarian Universalists and averaged all our demographic categories and qualities, the average Unitarian Universalist you'd come up with is a college-educated, white, cisgendered, heterosexual woman baby boomer. If you're willing, all present can raise your hands and identify each other. We value education so much in Unitarian Universalism that we easily overlook on a regular basis that 1/3 of us in any given congregation are not college educated. Whoa. 2/3 is a lot, but when you look at this way, 1/3 is also a lot. That's a lot of people. Not everyone among us has a college degree, listens to NPR, knows about good wine, appreciates art, and votes Democrat. The science of probability says you're in good company if you go that way, but it's not everybody. We have and we are a type. We are a type, like all types, that come with our own attendant and inherent prejudices and attitudes. It's cliche almost to say that we are the East Coast intellectual elite. Sitting here in Connecticut this morning, we are literally the East Coast intellectual elite. We don't care as much for the illiterate rabble. But we also have to ask, well, what's literacy? Literacy is not just the written word on the page, in books, printed on paper. Literacy itself can develop and change. From the advent of written language to the invention of radio and television and moving pictures, being literate meant knowing language, being able to read and write it, and learning from that in books and other such things. That's one literacy, but there are many others, especially now. Now we have an entirely new literacy developing that's primarily visual, but full of pictures, still or moving. If you go to someone to consult with them about designing a great website for your congregation, they're going to tell you to get rid of the text and replace it with images and video, not of your building, but of smiling faces and people doing things. It's a different literacy. No one's going to read all your text anymore. It's annoying and long-winded. I watched something fascinating happen with my son as he was growing up. As you would expect the child of a minister and an elementary school teacher to do, he read voraciously as a child until about middle school. And I don't think he's picked up a book that wasn't for high school or college since. He graduated with honors from a very prestigious college. Never see him read a book. It's not his primary literacy. He's not stupid. I read a lot less than I used to. During COVID, I noticed that for the first time in my life, I listened to more books than I read. Either from the Kindle or in a book with pages and paper. Literacy develops and evolves. What we consider to be smart changes along with it. There's nothing wrong with valuing education and intelligence, but we do need to watch out for our inherent biases, because they do have a great effect on us most often when we're not aware of it. We tend to assume that being educated and intelligent means having a college degree or a graduate degree, and an intellect geared towards reading and writing and text and debate and discussion and the scientific method and avoiding logical fallacies. It's all good stuff, don't get me wrong. But there are plenty of brilliant people who don't like to read even though they can. There are plenty of brilliant human beings who don't like to have debate and discussions about esoteric topics, and would not be caught dead in a museum of any kind, at an art house film, or listening to blech NPR. One of the things that tends to perpetuate ignorance and our view of what ignorance is in our society is a great cocktail of poverty, race, and geographic location. These combine to give us a horribly unethical intellectual and educational landscape. Example of this: I grew up in a small central Massachusetts town. It was full of apple orchards, then it was full of factories. We had two physically and administratively linked high schools in Leominster, Massachusetts: Leominster High School and Leominster Trade High School. LHS was for those who were going to college. And LHS students studied biology and chemistry and physics and algebra and calculus and trigonometry and literature and history and sociology and economics and history, and psychology and civics. Those are just some of my classes. LTHS was for students not going to college. And they studied reading and writing and life and earth science, auto mechanics, auto body, drafting, carpentry, plumbing, welding, culinary arts. LHS students, and I grew up in the 1980s, so forgive me everybody who's older and younger than me, listened to pop and new wave music, wore skinny ties, dyed our hair weird colors, played sports, did student activities like the student council, and performed in musicals. Trade rats listened to heavy metal and wore jean jackets and did drugs and drank a lot of alcohol. Of course, that's nonsense. It was nonsense then, but it was the way the entire world I knew then organized students in education, creating, reinforcing, and playing into classes and divisions that didn't need to exist. It taught us who we were and where we belonged, and who we weren't and where we didn't. Funding public schools by local property tax is about as racist and classist a practice as exists in our society. It keeps vast segments of our population poor and with limited access to social and political power and advancement. If we could change only one single thing about our society, I think changing the way we fund public education would have the greatest impact of anything we could implement. Yes, we're in a Unitarian Universalist church, so I'm going to cite NPR because it's what we do in our type. A 2016 Spotlight piece they had to go look up because I remember hearing this. And I went to get the statistic that grabbed me, and it was this: that they studied neighborhoods in and around Chicago for school expenditure. One neighborhood in Chicago, the poorest, and therefore the poorest school district, spent on average at the time $9,000 a year per pupil. The richest 14 miles away, spent $28,000 a year per pupil. All people are created equal, but we're not taught equal. We're not even taught we are equal. As much as our attitudes and biases are something that we can pay attention to and learn from and watch in terms of demeaning or criticizing someone who's less educated or less intelligent, the ability to think critically, solve problems, and understand basic logic is of vital health to a functioning society. You can't have a whole group of people having a society run by people who can't think critically. It doesn't go well. History has taught us. So at the same time, we need to watch our prejudices and attitudes about those who are uneducated or unintelligent. We also need to realize that helping everyone become as educated as they can and learn how to think critically is of supreme importance for the type of society we want to live in. As the MAGA movement developed in 2015 and 2016, you saw Dietrich Bonhoeffer's writings surface a lot more than it had since the 1940s when he wrote it, because it fit the MAGA description to a T. And Bonhoeffer was not just picking on stupid people at random. He was a German Lutheran pastor who was studying and then taught theology at the University of Berlin by the age of 25. And as the Nazis rose to power, he opposed them. He visited America and returned to Germany, where eventually he was forbidden to write or publish anything for being critical of the Nazi regime. And he was arrested in 1943 and sent to prison. He was executed by hanging on April 9th, 1945, without any charges against him, any trial, any proceedings, or anything else. In some of his writings from prison, especially what is now called Papers and Letters from Prison, Letters and Papers from Prison, I always forget which is first, Bonhoeffer concluded that stupidity is more dangerous to the good than malice and evil. Some more of what he wrote. The stupid person is under a spell, blinded, misused, and abused in their very being. Having thus become a mindless tool, the stupid person will be capable of any evil and at the same time incapable of seeing that it is evil. This is where the danger of diabolical misuse lurks, for it is this that can once and for all destroy human beings. The stupid person, in contrast to the malicious one, is utterly self-satisfied, and being easily irritated becomes dangerous by going on the attack. For that reason, greater caution is called for with the stupid person than the malicious one. I hear Bonhoeffer's words now, and I think, how can so many people fall prey to the demagogues and the would-be tyrants? People who obviously don't have their best interest at heart, but just want their support for the power and control it gives them. And then I have to remember to remind myself that no one votes against their own self-interest. Politicians and policies may not, in fact, help certain people, but no one, you don't, no one else does, votes against what they perceive and understand as their self-interest. And as we think they are deluded, so they think we are deluded. Bonhoeffer says, these thoughts about stupidity also offer consolation that they utterly forbid us to consider the majority of people to be stupid in every circumstance. It really will depend on whether those in power expect more from people's stupidity than, say, from their inner independence and own wisdom. This much is certain, that it is in essence not an intellectual defect, but a common human one. These are human beings who are remarkably agile intellect, and yet they are stupid. And so it would seem that stupidity is perhaps less a psychological than a social logical problem. It is particularly the form of impact of historical circumstances on human beings, a psychological concomitant of certain external conditions. It becomes apparent that every strong usurpage of power in the public sphere, be it of political or religious nature, infects a large part of the populace with stupidity. The power of the one needs the stupidity of the other. The process at work is not that particular human capacities, for instance, the intellect, suddenly atrophy and fail. Instead, it seems that under overwhelming impact of rising power, humans are deprived of their inner independence and give up establishing an autonomous position toward their emerging circumstances. Bonhoeffer is clear that very intelligent people can be stupid. And the way he discusses stupidity, what he's talking about is ignorance. Not knowing things and not using because you can't, because you on purpose don't use the facilities that you have. We like to think we are reasonable creatures, but it's only part of who we are because we are equally, if not more so, emotional ones. Years ago, I had to literally throw out a member of a congregation because they were screaming and yelling at the director of religious education and physically advancing towards them with hands raised, screaming at the top of their lungs that their humanist discussion group had every right to make jokes about and make fun of the New Age spirituality group because they were unreasonable and foolish. And all their beliefs were controlled by emotions. Sigh. Oh. Fear, hate, anger, the deadly trinity of emotions that twirl around each other, and we lose sight of reason. We don't want to hear arguments. We don't want to hear about data. We don't want to hear about facts that contradict our own preferred conclusions. And over time, in an instant, stupidity does evil and becomes evil. Just this week, we heard of the death of Dex Benedict in Oklahoma, a non-binary teenager bullied for who they are. And the ignorance that blocks out kindness and compassion and feeds off fear and prejudice. Ignorant and stupid, and ends up killing a child. Again. Stupidity, ignorance isn't more dangerous than malice and evil. It is a malice and evil of its own, in its own way. Be it the lie of a master race, or that an election was stolen, or that there's no such thing as a non-binary person. Once a person is bought into the lie, it becomes increasingly difficult to reach them in any reasonable way. And that's what makes it frightening. Carl Sagan called it one of the saddest lessons of history that once a person has bought the con and taken the deep dive, they reject any evidence that they've been, and I love his word, bamboozled. And he says, we no longer interested in finding out the truth. The bamboozles captured us. It's simply too painful to acknowledge, even to ourselves, we've been taken. And once you give a charlatan power over you, you almost never get it back. And we read the results of the primary in South Carolina yesterday and say, whoa, we really have our work cut out for us. And perhaps because of that, we start right here with ourselves here in this congregation. By continuing and looking for ever better ways to make this faith, this congregation, and this community a champion of reason and critical thinking and education, as well as a place of kindness and compassion and inclusion and justice and equity. We have a social justice team organizing or reorganizing or organizing or reorganizing right now here. So maybe one of the things we can do together is extend an invitation to our community, the people who live around us right here in our part of Connecticut, to those who are like us and to those who are not like us especially, to enter into conversation. As we champion our values, as we do our own individual work to get out the vote and work for all type of really valuable and humanitarian causes. Maybe we can also spearhead and organize a civil conversation project, a Better Angels group, where we gather our neighbors together and together we learn how to have difficult conversations across our differences and then have those very conversations about specific topics that actually we don't agree upon on purpose. I don't want to fall into false equivalency on this, but our continued estrangement from our neighbors along any lines is not the way to peace, and it's not the ultimate way to justice, and it's not the ultimate way to fairness and equity. Because the evil that ignorance can unleash is a hell on earth. And so if our love is up to the task, I would like to suggest that our project then becomes together. We find a way to talk to those who are different from us and a way to love the hell out of the world. Thanks a lot for watching this video. It would help me out a great deal if you liked the video to give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, share this video with others, maybe ring that notification bell so you can be informed when we put out other videos like this. Check out my website and blog at tonylorenzen.com for even more resources that will open your mind, touch your heart, and inspire your spirit.